Welcome back to Kings of the North here on a Monday. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. And hopefully Landis welcoming a batch of new viewers and listeners because everybody's fired up because the South is on fire.
People love to tell the South to cram it.
Yeah.
We're here to help them.
We are here. But I would like to say, if you're back and you've been here before, thanks for being here. We love you. If you're new and it's your first time on a Monday, thanks for being here. We love you. Saturday is for screaming. Saturday is for shouting. Saturday is for yelling. Saturday is for sweating and just letting it rip. Monday is for contemplative reflection and the Cram-o-meter. So that's what today is, Landis, right? Like, we're not just going to scream about the South. We have a lot of good Northern teams to highlight, dive into. But then we always do have a section where we tell the South to cram it, and that'll come around like the 35 or 40-minute mark.
Yeah. So Monday is for more contemplative cramming. We've had some time to really process some things and figure out exactly where we'd like the South to cram it and why. We just Saturday is to prepare them for the cram, and then Monday is when the cram actually happens.
I do like the idea of not only putting a number on it, but deciding where. So
it's usually right in the cram hole. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how many orifices are there in the human body? So it's like you have both nostrils, you got both ears, you got your mouth. I don't know. Like, I think you could cram something in your armpit if you needed to, like you really needed to, and then there's your cram hole. So, maybe it's a little bit like Clue. It's not just like the weapon, it's also the room. So it's Bill gives him an 800 in the left ear hole. Oh, it's a left ear hole week for the South. But the thing is, there's so much cramming going on, they need all the orifices. It's like Missouri's going in an ear, Tennessee's going in another ear. Bama might be, we know where Bama's going. And then there's always a nostril reserved for Georgia.
That's right.
So, the South is so bad right now that they're running out of places to cram it. But we're going to start. We're back to our group of categories. Last Monday, we did fan base happiness ratings, which I think we had a good time with. And we touch on every Northern team on the Monday show. But we normally do categories: team of the week, player that blew my mind, team that changed my mind, team with a question, stuff like that. And we're going to start with the teams of the week this week, Landis. We each pick one. You picked Washington and I picked Iowa State. And we're going to start with Iowa State, who is 11th in the AP poll, 13th in the coaches poll, one of the 12 undefeated teams in college football. And if you don't know it and you want to tell your friends, there are 12 undefeated FBS teams, 3 in the South and 9 in the North. And that's just a fact. And that's just how it is. I think Iowa State is, I mean, it's one of those things. Iowa State is flying under the radar. I don't think people realize how good Iowa State is. Iowa State is an absolute legitimate contender in the Big 12. I think they're legitimately undefeated. The Iowa game certainly could have gone either way, but that's a road win. It's a 1-point road win on a 54-yard field goal where they made game-winning plays in the final minute on a game-winning drive in a game they were behind. But when you watch them, I think it really turns heads, Bill. And watching what they did to Baylor, the week after Baylor got down huge against BYU and then fought all the way back, not quite all the way back, they lost, but like, holy moly, Baylor's got some fight in them. Iowa State got in a similar position with Baylor, got behind early, and then just squashed them. And Iowa State is a typical team I think you would think of like a physical Midwestern team that doesn't make many mistakes defensively, is well coached, but then, by the way, has incredibly explosive skill players. And it is a rare combination, Bill. This is a grind it out, try to win with defense, happy to win 20-3 kind of team that absolutely, in Jalen Nolan, Jaden Higgins, has two guys who will blow the roof off a game at the drop of a hat. And this now becomes a team that I think is obviously right in the thick of any playoff conversation as a Big 12 champ, or potentially not as a Big 12 champ if they're a one-loss Big 12 team or a two-loss Big 12 team that loses the Big 12 championship game. But bottom line, Bill, it's only October. We don't have to wrap everything in a playoff conversation. They're so good.
I think that's it, right? It's just like they're good. Yeah, like it's nothing about this to me feels fake. And it was 14-3 going into the second quarter. And I sent a message to you like, Iowa State's screwing around here. Like they need, and then they just stopped. And we've talked about how Matt Campbell is probably perfectly comfortable winning games 21-20 or whatever the Iowa was. But more and more, this also looks like a team that can put a 40 up if it needs to. Like if it gets into a game where it becomes a little bit of a track meet, and this wasn't really a track meet. Iowa State, I think, got stopped on downs on its first drive. Baylor went down there and scored and got a couple early touchdowns. But Iowa State was moving the ball at a much more regular clip than Baylor was in this game. But if you look ahead of what might come down the schedule for Iowa State, whether that's in the Big 12 race or in a playoff matchup kind of thing, I do think this is an offense that can probably hold serve with a lot of others across college football because of the explosive potential of the receivers. Yes, Rocco Becht, I think, is playing really well.
Yep.
And the run game does seem like it's starting to round in the form a little bit. I know like Jalen Jackson, the transfer from Eastern Michigan running back, had 107 yards and 2 touchdowns in this game. It's not been Abu Sama, who we thought it would be as an explosive running back here, but I don't really care who it is as long as you show an ability to do it. And even that looks good. And then the defense is smothering. Like they just don't give anything. Yep. They play really hard. So it looks like a complete football team to me. And I think Iowa State should be viewed as probably the favorite in the Big 12 right now. And it's not by a large margin, but just based off the way that it has played compared to some other teams that have had a couple of clunkers, Iowa State just looks very dangerous in that conference. And I think increasingly looks dangerous nationally.
5-0 for the first time since 1980. You brought up Jalen Jackson, 2 years at Lamar, 2 years at Eastern Michigan. His 5th year of college football is now at Iowa State. He's 5'8" and 180 pounds. He's a bowling ball, and he cuts like a madman. Mm-hmm. Go watch the highlights. That guy cuts. They are sharp. I didn't know a bowling ball could have such sharp edges. He's a bowling square. Like if you had like a cube going down, it's like cutting up the lane because it's so sharp on the edges. He ran 14 times for 96 yards against Houston, 15 times for 107 against Baylor. Matt Campbell called him electric. I think like you can tell watching Matt Campbell how much he likes Jalen Jackson. They blocked a punt. They were down 14-12 late in the second quarter coming back. Miles Mendezoon blocked it. He's like their special teams ace. Cade Madsen picked it up and ran it in for a score. They talked about like the Baylor punter's really good. They dialed it up. It's one of those things. It's not. I don't know how familiar Iowa State is to the average college football fan or even the average Northern fan. Mm-hmm. So if you kind of want to pretend that it's Iowa with two, imagine how like Iowa, so fundamental, playing complementary football, such a smothering defense with 2 incredibly explosive receivers and a dude who can sling it. And all the special teams competence that you would want. And I know if you are an Iowa fan or an Iowa State fan, I think maybe you are saying, keep my rival's name out of your mouth. It's a compliment to both teams.
Yes.
And this is something I'm going to talk about this more on the Tuesday show, but it's something I would like us to try to work through in the North, acknowledging how good the other Northern teams are. I don't like when you hate somebody and the hate makes you think they stink. I actually think it makes far more sense to hate somebody and acknowledge how good they are. So then when you beat them, it hurts them even more and makes you feel even better because they're good. Mm-hmm. So Iowa fans who were right there and probably should have won the game, they should acknowledge how good Iowa State is. And Iowa State winning at Kinnick should acknowledge how good Iowa is, because that is Iowa State's best win. And I do think it is one of the better wins in college football this year among actually good teams, because a lot of the other wins are like, hey, well, we have a good win. We beat Bama, but we also lost to Georgia State. So I don't know what to do with that. I know what to do with Iowa State. They're excellent. So I get on board here. Yards per play. Their defense is 11th in the country in giving up the fewest amounts of yards per play. Mm-hmm. Their offense is 26th in the country. So there's balance, right? They're good at both things. Their backfield is pretty deep, and they have an absolute banger, 8 o'clock Saturday night on Fox at West Virginia. That will be one of our big game breakdowns on Thursday. This is a gigantic Big 12 game, and I think right now, we'll continue to talk about the Big 12. I think people are not thinking the right way about Kansas State. And I don't mean you, But like the Kansas State loss was so weird. And it doesn't mean you get to wipe it off the board. And that's a great win for BYU. But I think a lot of what people thought Kansas State was in the preseason is still absolutely there. And I think they've worked through some of their issues, where other times you see teams, well, I thought they were this, and it's like, no, they're not that. No, Kansas State is that. So to me, acknowledging how good BYU is, I would consider Kansas State and Iowa State almost co-favorites in the Big 12 right now, and an underrated, not even disrespected, just like a BYU team that was so far out of the consciousness coming in that it's harder. Like, can BYU win the Big 12? Absolutely. If I was betting my house on it, right, which is that's different than how you rank people. We're just talking about who we think's actually going to win it. I would say Iowa State or Kansas State. So those to me are maybe the two most complete teams in this conference right now.
I think that's right. And I had some notes about that I want to talk about when we do our rankings later, because I do think that conversation is interesting about those teams at the top of the Big 12.
So anyway, Iowa State's awesome. And so can I lead you into your team of the week with the stat?
Yeah.
There are 3 teams in the country, and they all happen to be in the North. What do you know? Stats just happen. That have 2 receivers with at least 400 yards this season. Do you want to guess who those 3 teams are?
Iowa State. Is Iowa State one of them?
Iowa State. Jalen Noel and Jaden Higgins. Jalen Noel has 451 and Jaden Higgins has 403. Washington is correct. Denzel Boston, 492. Giles Jackson, 479. And
the Ohio State, the third one?
Ohio State. Jeremiah Smith, 453. Emeka Buka, 433. So that's a compliment to Iowa State and how good those 2 receivers are and the way Rocco Beck finds both of them. And it is a compliment to, we know what Ohio State is, but it's a compliment to what Washington is managing to do. And that's why they're your team of the week.
They are my team of the week, but that also that you just laid out that makes me think maybe we should revisit our skill position rankings that we did in the offseason. Like obviously Ohio State and Iowa State are probably going to stay where they were, but now Washington's very interesting with those 2 receivers and the running back Jonah Coleman, who I think is certainly among the best running backs in the North, but I think among one of the best running backs in the country. And Will Rogers is slinging it a little bit too at quarterback. Like, this is a good offense.
I mean, we had a bunch of Caleb Johnson conversations last week around the Iowa running back, and we kept saying things like Caleb Johnson should be in the Heisman race. He is second in the country in a stat. Jonah Coleman's first. Like, we kept saying, like, I felt we kept having Caleb Johnson conversations, which I think were legitimate. Ohio State's defense did a very good job of shutting him down. Doesn't mean he's not a great back. But there was a lot of, oh, by the way, Jonah Coleman in there. And it was like, wait, should we be doing more about Jonah Coleman? So let's do it now.
I think we should. So Jonah Coleman in the win against Michigan he only had 80 rushing yards, so he's held under 100 yards, but he did score a touchdown. He's now number 6 in the country in yards after contact. He's number 4 in the country in like the missed tackles forced metric that PFF keeps. He has just been incredibly elusive this year for Washington. He had a nasty jump cut on a run late in the game against Michigan too. He is a complete running back, and really the only question I had about Washington's offense was whether or not the offensive line would hold up when it went up against a good defensive front, which is certainly what Michigan has. And I thought that group played pretty well too. So like this Washington, I think, is a dangerous team. It has not done itself any service by, being a little undisciplined with penalties, undisciplined with special teams, which we've talked about a lot, but it was in this game. And this felt to me like a little bit of proof of concept for Jedd Fisch at Washington. Like if Washington can play a clean game or something close to it, or at least something closer to it than what it showed against Washington State or Rutgers, then I think Washington can hang with a lot of teams. And it has a really difficult schedule moving forward. So even the fact that Washington might be bowl eligible this year because it's now sitting at 4 wins, it's not a guarantee when Iowa, Indiana, USC, Penn State, and Oregon are still on the schedule. But I think Washington is good enough to give any one of those teams a game if it plays the way that it played against Michigan. And that was my biggest takeaway from the way that it won that game on Saturday, practically doubling up Michigan in yardage. I think doing a nice job of keeping Michigan's rushing attack in check, not getting outmanned on the line of scrimmage in the way that I thought it would. And it just feels like there's pretty good vibes and momentum there for a program that I really didn't think would have either this season.
No.
I really thought this year was going to be not a lost cause, because you can still be building something even if you're losing, but just not a whole lot of energy there. And they had a great crowd for this game, and like Bill Belichick was there doing NIL stuff for Washington, and Jedd Fisch after the game is talking about what a win like this might mean for recruiting. And I just don't, not to put too much on one game, but this felt like Washington, I think, avoiding a step back year. Like, obviously it's not going to be as good as it was last year when we went to the national championship, but it is not falling back nearly as much as I thought it would, which is a credit first and foremost to the players, obviously, for how they're playing for Washington. But I think for Jedd Fisch and his staff too, and what they've been able to kind of cultivate there in a very short amount of time to keep that program pointed in the right direction.
Let's talk about your guy, Jedd Fisch. You said probably 4 times on this show that you thought Jedd Fisch was going to maybe take the Florida job.
Yeah.
Not to put too fine of a point on it, but do you think we could be looking back in 10 years and Jedd Fisch in his book or in a documentary or something will be talking about how Florida boosters were reaching out to him the week of the Washington-Michigan game, and then Washington got revenge for the national title game in front of a great home crowd, and his players fought their butts off, and he looked around and thought to himself, I don't need to go back to my alma mater. I'm already home. Is this the day that Jedd Fisch became a Husky?
Oh, that's really good. Yeah, maybe. I think maybe. Because there's... especially if we're going to compare it to Florida, right? Like, Florida just is like a cesspool. Like, why would you want to go there, right? Like, I get it. Like, you can walk out your front door and there's a bunch of 5-star prospects. But I don't mean the state in general. I mean the program. But there's so much support behind the Washington program right now, and I don't know. I would much rather want to be there than be in Gainesville. I guess is the way that I would put it. So we'll see if Florida does make a run at Jedd Fisch. I think it probably, I don't know, maybe it'll just hire Lane Kiffin and we don't have to worry about it. But if I'm advising Jedd Fisch, it is stay in Seattle and don't go to the swamp.
So here's the thing about Washington and the things that matter to coaches. Coaches want to know that if they do everything right, they can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Can we do it? Is it even feasible? And when you look at what Washington has been traditionally, they have had an all-time coach. They have won national championships in the past. They have been a true power. Maybe like not quite tier 1 blue blood, but excellent long-time tradition, excellent college football team. They're in a city, which can certainly help in an NIL modern universe. They just made the national championship game. And now if you think that was, and it's certainly not a fluke, but if you think it was something culminating, it was a culmination, and now we're coming back to earth. But earth is this. Earth is beating Michigan. Earth is having great skill players. Earth is throwing the ball all over the place with a starting quarterback. And by the way, your future quarterback's getting in there too. Yeah. Earth is finding a way to patch together a completely new offensive line because your really good offensive line from last year left. And Earth is finding a way to bring in a couple coaches with famous last names who actually probably can coach a little bit. And you figure out that Washington is not a place maybe where you will ever bottom out. And so you'll always be pretty good, and you do have a chance to be very good. I think this could have been incredibly eye-opening. And for the fans, maybe it's not. Maybe this is why fans were mad Washington was picked in the middle of the pack of the Big Ten behind Rutgers, because they think we're Washington. And maybe too many people thought, yeah, but what does that mean? Well, it means this. And I don't know where Jedd Fisch's head was at, but man, this was pretty persuasive. Mm-hmm. So like really important weekend for Washington and a great year so far. So it's your team of the week, but it's your team of the week because it might have been a week that changed the face of Washington football. I just like doing voiceovers.
Yeah. But I think that is a pretty compelling prologue though to the Jedd Fisch book.
Yeah. You want to write a Jedd Fisch book? Is it books anymore? Or is it narrative podcast / documentary? We'll ask Jedd.
It can be all three. Yeah.
Because the whole thing is like he goes back to his place of where he grew up in New Jersey the week before, and they make mistakes and they lose in New Jersey in the greatest home environment in the history of Rutgers football. Mm-hmm. And as a Jersey guy, he looks around and says, wow, look what they have done. And he's on the plane flying back 3,000 miles for a conference game thinking, what have I gotten myself into? We're not even Jersey. I never thought that would be Jersey, but then can that be us? And then while he's on the flight, maybe he's looking down and there's Florida boosters in his phone. I'm making this up. This is just based on a true story. I'm not saying it's a true story. And then he lands and he has a fully, do you like contemplative? What's it? How do we pronounce contemplative? How did you say it?
Contemplative.
Yeah. There's a lot of pronunciation stuff that we probably need to sit down and have a conversation about. It's a contemplative week. It's a lot of long walks. And then on Saturday, the last walk is to Husky Stadium, and then they take care of business. Okay. I think that at least regionally, I think that 3-part miniseries would do well. What's the team that changed your mind? That's another category that we like to do here on most Mondays.
Yeah, it's Nebraska, because Nebraska won a close game, and I just wanted to give them a shout out. I don't know if beating Rutgers 14-7 really exercises all those demons, especially when it was like 97 degrees with 50-mile-an-hour winds, which, by the way, I thought was only possible on like Mars or maybe a warmer planet than Mars. I don't think I've ever seen a day where it was that windy and that hot. So shout out to those guys for playing through it. But it's a 1-possession game. It's the second time now that Nebraska has won a 1-score game under Matt Rule to move to 2-6, and it moves to 9-31 and such. And the game's decided by 8 points or fewer since 2018. But honestly, like, to be more serious about it, I was pretty impressed with Nebraska's defense in that game. And I don't know if Nebraska necessarily changed my mind as a team that can like win with defense, because I kind of thought that's what it was going to be anyway. But the goal line stand that it had in the second half of that game, Rutgers blocks a punt and gets the ball to 2-yard line and has 5 plays to score a touchdown. Also, it might have scored a touchdown, but it didn't get called. It didn't get called.
That's coming.
It didn't get called. It didn't get called a touchdown. And there were just some awesome plays made in there by Nash Hutmacher. Our guy got a couple of big time run stops, and then a really nice tackle. Who I had it written down here? Deshaun Singleton on like a play in space, like a play action pass. Had to run all the way from the other side of the formation to make a tackle to help keep Rutgers out of the end zone.
The play that you run after you get stopped on 2 run plays at the goal line, it's the play that every non-super great offensive team runs, which is sort of like a little play action rollout, flip it to the tight end. And a lot of times, right, there's usually a rub or some kind of pick play to free that guy up, and you see it work all the time. And it did not work because that Nebraska defender was like, nope, I'm going to make this tackle in space. It was great.
Yeah, it was a great play. So I mostly just wanted to shout out Rutgers for winning a close game. I don't know that
Nebraska. Shout out Nebraska.
Excuse me, Nebraska for winning a close game. I don't know that it changed my mind a whole lot, but I do think this defense is legit. Holding Rutgers to 78 rushing yards. It's the number 6 rushing defense in the country now, and it's still the only defense to not give up a rushing touchdown this year. So that was a pretty impressive performance by that front.
So the team that changed your mind maybe didn't actually change your mind. Is that what you're saying?
The team, well, yeah, they changed, but they pushed me a little more toward maybe this team has the stuff that it needs to win a close game.
Okay.
But I'm not going to go all the way there because of some circumstances.
The team that changed my mind also after contemplative reflection actually did not change my mind. Because the team that changed my mind is Rutgers. And what I thought maybe was happening, I wouldn't say giving up on Rutgers, but maybe acknowledging that it's just a little out over my skis at 7-2 and that they really are grinding away. And there's maybe not. I'm sorry I ever thought it, Greg. I'm still there. I'm not leaving. Rewatching this game, because there was stuff in the moment where it's like, oh, Rutgers, right? There was like multiple Rutgers moments. And they ran the ball early. They started the game with 9 run plays and 3 pass plays. And it's like they're getting the ball to Kyle Monungai. And then they started throwing it all over the place. And I know there was some reaction. I saw some headlines about like, why didn't they run the ball? And it's a reflection of the standard at Rutgers being raised. The standard at Rutgers has been raised so high that people were legitimately mad that they lost by 7 at Nebraska. That's where we are with Rutgers. But nobody coaches harder than Greg Schiano. And it comes out of every pore in his body. There are football teams that make it look easy, and there are teams that make it look hard, and everything Rutgers does looks hard. It is never easy, but you also know what's not easy, Landis? Chopping wood. This is not chainsaw chopping wood. When they do this, you don't see Greg Schiano going, ring, ding, 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 ding. He's not getting out the chainsaw. It's an axe. So if we think we've I have Big Ten media days. I wanted to hand Greg Schiano the chainsaw. Here, Greg, 7-2. It's like, I'm not a chainsaw coach. I'm an axe coach. This was an axe game. They tried a fake field goal on 4th and 4 that got completely snuffed out. After the game, Greg Schiano said, we didn't run it right. Okay, because it didn't really look like it was going to work at all. They kicked a 52-yard field goal. It banged off the upright so hard, I thought the stadium was going to fall down in 50-mile-per-hour winds. They got stopped on the goal line stand. You talked about Kyle Monangai had the ball, one of the best running backs in the country. The entire top half of his body fell in the end zone. The only way that wasn't a touchdown was if he was holding the ball between his knees. I have no idea. And Greg Schiano was asked multiple questions after the game. And NJ.com does a great job covering Rutgers. They asked him 3 times. He said he talked to the officials on the sideline and said, should I challenge this? And they told him, they already looked at it. It's not going to get overturned. So he didn't want to waste the timeout. So he was like, what, in a close game, why would I waste a second half timeout on a challenge that I know is not going to be successful, that the officials are telling me is not going to be successful? All I would say to that is, I don't think that's how that's supposed to work. Yeah. You can't go by the pre-challenge. The pre-challenge was rejected, so I didn't challenge. Because, Bill, if they had looked at it, like they were like, it's not a touchdown. And like he went by that. It was so obviously a touchdown. And like, I don't even think they should answer the question. And then NJ.com said, we want to talk to the official as a pool reporter to get the explanation here. And they said it doesn't rise to the level of a pool reporter question for the official. All we'll tell you is he could have challenged. So it's super weird.
Yeah,
it is super weird. And I'm like not blaming Greg Schiano, but I think he caught himself in a hard coaching vortex because he doesn't want to give up a timeout that's not going to work. He should have challenged it. And I think it would have been a touchdown, and it completely would have changed the face of the game because they wound up not scoring there. And then what happened? So then they stopped Nebraska and then got a short field. So this is what happened. 5 shots from the 2 didn't get in. Nebraska takes over at the 2, does nothing. Nebraska punts out of its own end zone. Rutgers returned it to the 28. So they're 28 yards from the end zone to start that drive. They take 2 sacks on the drive, go backwards 17 yards, and wind up punting from their 45. So they got literally nothing out of not getting that. But the whole point of this is people thought they should have run the ball more. Nebraska was attacking the run game in the second half. Ethan Kaliak-Manis threw an awesome deep ball, threw another awesome deep ball that hit the guy in the face mask. I can't believe he didn't catch it. It would have been a touchdown. Ethan Kaliak-Manis fought his butt off. The reason I was going to change my mind about Rutgers is because I had been thinking with Ethan Kaliak-Manis, the transfer quarterback, they had opened up the passing game enough to open up some things for them, and maybe this was a step back. It wasn't. They didn't have any other options, and the reason they could hang in against a really good defense was because they could throw the ball at times a little bit, and they fought so freaking hard. I apologize, Rutgers, for ever thinking I was going to change my mind. So strike this graphic from the show. I didn't change nothing. I'm riding with the Knights. The only thing is Greg Schiano should have challenged. And then he said, like, I've seen it now. And they said, what do you think? And he went like this.
Give him a head tilt.
He head tilted. Like a confused golden retriever, and said, like, I'm not so then he didn't want to get fined. So don't make me change my mind on Rutgers, Bill. Don't make me do this. I'm sticking with them.
I won't do it. They never showed a replay, like even like during the broadcast. It makes me wonder if they had the camera angle.
They showed the back of Monangai. And it was like
but they never showed the tight down the goal line.
Yes, you're right.
View, which also, like, a lot of times they showed that and it's like a massive bodies, you can't see it. There was nobody there. It was like the clearest shot you'll ever see on a guy and trying to run in from the 2-yard line, and they just didn't have that angle. Not that I think they needed it, because to me it definitely looked like he got into the end zone. I guess Greg Schiano thinks at that point, like, they're on the 1 and they have 3 more plays, we're going to score, and then he gets tackled for a loss after that, and then they throw the ball twice and don't score.
So, like, the only thing would be if he was saying, like, hey, should I challenge? If they would have said, sorry, Greg, camera broke. Or, hey, sorry, Greg, butt in front of the camera. We don't have an angle. That if it's like they called it on the field, not a touchdown.
Mm-hmm.
And then if they were saying, we don't have an angle, there's not going to be an angle that's going to allow us to overturn it because whatever, the camera malfunctioned, the ref accidentally stood in front of the camera. If that's what they're telling him, regardless of what you do, we're not overturning it because there literally is no angle. Because to your point, they didn't show it on the TV. But so if that's the case, and then Rutgers got screwed.
Yeah.
Because he scored. Go watch it if you didn't watch it.
He definitely
good scored. Football game. We told people to watch this game, like good physical. Matt Rule coaches hard too. 2 former NFL head coaches coaching middle of the pack, Big Ten teams hard and playing good ball. Low scoring, but I thought playing good ball and basically doing everything they could do, and 2 really good defenses.
Yeah, good defense can be good ball. I'll stand by that.
Let's remind people of that. All right, who's the player that blew your mind? We're going long on this. I'm passionate about some of this Northern ball, Bill.
Yeah.
There's some really important Northern ball that I didn't talk about on Saturday night because of the shouting.
Yeah,
so
it's okay.
Going long.
Yeah, we can. I can breeze through my part here a little bit because we did talk about him some on Saturday night. It's Darius Taylor, the running back from Minnesota, who just had a monster game against USC. He had 200 total yards from scrimmage, 25 carries for 144 yards, 5 receptions for 56 yards. He didn't score, but he was really churning out some drives for Minnesota in that game. Had some really impressive longer runs, like stuff that were hitting for between like 8 to 20 yards, where he was just like stacking defenders, making them miss. He had 116 yards after contact in the game. He had 9 missed tackles forced. And it was just like, yes, this is what Darius Taylor is supposed to do for Minnesota. He was not healthy to start the year. He had a season taken away from him by injury last year. But when this guy is 100%, he is dynamic. He is among the best running backs in the country. He is a guy that can win a game for you. And I thought that was on full display in this game. And they were doing some cool stuff with him too in the passing game. We've talked about how they're throwing the ball more. He has 30 targets this year. He had 11 last year. He has 30 targets this year. It's third among FBS running backs. And they ran a really cool play. I think it was in the third quarter, where he lined up in the slot and motioned into the backfield and like never stopped moving. And they faked a handoff to him, and then everyone on the defense like followed the run action, and then Darius Taylor just kept leaking out after the run fake, and they threw him a screen pass, and he had like 3 offensive linemen in front of him, and I think he gained like 15 or 16 yards. So it's not just check it down Darius Taylor, which has worked well for Minnesota. They're also getting pretty creative with how they use him in the passing game, and I just like he's a guy who's going to touch the ball. I think, provided he's healthy, he's going to touch it between 25 and 30 times a game moving forward for Minnesota, because he has to, and he's good enough to take it that much.
So we had talked about the idea that Minnesota had played 2 great defenses in Iowa and Michigan, their 2 previous games. And now it was like, let them out of the straitjacket a little bit, but here comes the USC skill. It was one of those situations where between Darius Taylor and then Daniel Jackson at receiver, who also made some plays that really mattered.
Yep.
I didn't think Minnesota's skill took a backseat to USC's skill.
No, I don't think so either, especially the running back situation, because Woody Marks from USC has been pretty like slippery and like both a good runner and a good receiver. And I think people are pretty excited about how well he's played this year. And it's like Darius Taylor's better. And it's not that Woody Marks is a bad player, but like Darius Taylor was definitely, I think, the best skill player on that game on either team.
And then they had Marcus Major as a number 2 running back, which is a good like compliment to him. Like that was, we have a little bit more Minnesota later in our show. That was a culmination. That was a great night for Minnesota. And I'm glad that slow start, but this like get this guy healthy. This is what he was last year. What did he play? 6 games last year? And when the 6 he played, he was electric. And then sometimes he wasn't out there. So let's keep Darius Taylor healthy. I had a player that blew my mind and I changed it to 2 because I want to make sure I acknowledge just the absolute like super entertaining football circus that is the Syracuse offense right now. So this was a Friday night game. It got a lot of pub in the moment. It's an overtime win for Syracuse at UNLV. So the guys that blew my mind were Kyle McCord, the quarterback, and LaQuint Allen, the running back. on LeQuint Allen first. If you didn't watch the game, it came down to Syracuse marching for a tying drive in the final minutes, and they ran a 4th and 1 play that they had LeQuint Allen, who's their number 1 running back, offset and ran a jet sweep to him. So it was a jet sweep handoff action that looks like how you would hand it to a receiver, except you're handing it to your best running back. So I like that idea. I understand you're tight on 4th down, but we're not going to we're going to hand it to the guy who does this. And thank God they did, because he got wide and he got popped. So I wrote this down. It was at the there it was 4th and 1. They needed to get to the 23-yard line for the first down. LeQuint Allen got hit at the 26 and knocked backwards to the 27 and kept going and got the first down by 4 yards, and then got a late hit out of bounds at the end of it. It was an unremarkable, completely remarkable play. And then also he won the game in overtime by getting tackled on the edge and absolutely not stopping his legs and running through. He dragged a linebacker into the end zone. So he twice saved the game in space by absolutely refusing to be tackled. And after the game, he said, I would die out there for my teammates if I could. I love my teammates. And I swear to God, I just got chills. LeQuint Allen, absolute Northern King. If you have not seen the highlights, watch a football player be a football player, Landis.
He's really good. And he is, I mentioned that Darius Taylor is 3rd among FBS running backs and targets. LeQuint Allen is one of the guys who's ahead of him. It's another situation where Syracuse just can't run the ball, but they're making sure that LeQuint Allen still gets the ball, whether it's throwing it to him or giving it to him on a jet sweep, like you're talking about. But guess what? Sometimes you hand it to him, and sometimes he just runs over your defender on his way. He's an excellent running back. He was really good last year in a tough situation, and I think is finding ways to still be good this year, and not the best conditions for a running back.
4 touchdowns in that win over UNLV. And then the other part of it is Kyle McCord, who is just a show. You cannot take your eyes off the guy. He had 5 big-time throws by the PFF metric on Saturday. That was the most of anybody in the Power 4 this weekend. He had 3 turnover-worthy plays. That was second most of any quarterback this weekend. Their game-winning drive, he hit a linebacker in the hands with the pass and then threw the tying touchdown pass. He is so fun to watch, and he will give you a heart attack. Yep. So he threw at 31-31. He threw a horrible pick where the linebacker was in coverage and was standing between Kyle McCord and the receiver the entire way. And Kyle McCord just either acted like the guy wasn't there or didn't. He had to see him. He stared him down. But just believed in his own ability to throw it through another human being and made the throw anyway. But the thing is, Landis, sometimes he can throw it through people. He rips balls. He hits outs from the hash to either side constantly. He has a great arm. He makes mistakes. He makes huge plays. He is the perfect quarterback for a team like Syracuse, because if they didn't have him, they'd be treading water. He is a cannonball. He is off the top dive, and everyone's chanting for him to do a cannonball, and then he hits the water, and everybody gets splashed, and they scream, and they're so happy. And then they're looking down at the bottom of the pool, and they're like, is Kyle drowning? And then they have to jump in and save him and pull him out. And then he's like, I'm okay. And then he goes back up on the high dive again. And everybody's like, he's back on the high dive. And if he was at Ohio State right now, 100,000 people in the shoe every weekend would be dying. So maybe he wasn't the right quarterback for Ohio State. He is so good. He is so boomer bust. He is so fun. He is so talented. He is so frustrating on at least 2 throws a game. It's ball, brother. He blows my mind with 70% of the time it's good, and 30% of the time it is how are you still trying to do that? It is so crazy.
Kyle McCord last year at Ohio State attempted 348 passes in 12 games. He has attempted 113 in the last 2 games. He leads the country with 240 pass attempts. He is slinging that rock.
And it's like, how fun is it for him? But again, guess what? When you ask somebody to throw it 55 times a game, like 3 of them might be weird.
Yeah, right.
Like that, and it's not even like on him, but it's like you cannot take your eyes off the guy. You cannot take your eyes off him. It is so fun, and they are gonna be a crazy fun and good, like far more good than bad, Landis. But if he's going to take you on a 12-play drive to win the game, one of those 12 plays is going to be on the edge of ending the game the wrong way. But if you don't get him, he will get you. Do not give Kyle McCord a second chance.
I feel like every Syracuse game is going to be close. So like if you were ranking teams by entertainment quality alone, Syracuse is pretty high up there.
It's so good. So we'll have a bunch more, and I think we're going to plan to go see him, right? A couple Thursdays, Syracuse at Pitt. We're going to be there.
Get to see Kyle McCord and Eli Holstein in the same game is going to be a show.
and like, how great is it? It's like, Northern ball in October. Yeah, Northern ball in October. 100 passes.
That's
the over under.
You're low.
The over under for the Pitt Syracuse game is 100 passes, 8 touchdowns, 4.5 picks. Let's go. 80 points. Let's go. I love it. I can't wait. I can't wait. They're so fun. And just like a legitimately great win. Okay. We got more categories in the third part, but the second part of the show is going to be the Cram-o-meter. How hard can the South cram it? Plus our top 11.5 rankings, which will kind of lead into the Cram-o-meter. All of that next on Kings of the North. Back on Kings of the North, Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis, our producer, Mike Yerstowski. If you want to give us a thumbs up, that would be fantastic. If you want to subscribe, that would be fantastic. We do it Saturday night, live on YouTube at 11 p.m. That means this Saturday, it'll be coming on the heels of the Ohio State-Oregon game. We do think, Landis, we may wait to start the show until that game is actually over. So we've been trying to hit that 11 o'clock mark each week, and sometimes we have half an eye on a game that's still going on. Mm-hmm. That's the game we really want to talk about. It's probably the best Northern game of the season. So we might wait for it to end. So maybe that means 11:12 Eastern, 11:07, 11:14. Is that you're the chief content officer? That's your call. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I just want to I want to allow ourselves the opportunity to keep eyeballs on the end of that game if it's necessary. Yeah, and maybe it won't be, and we'll still go to 11. But possibility that'll be more like 11, 10, 11. I mean, it's 7:30 kick, so it should still be over by like 11:15, I think.
So we have a good time on Saturday night. And if the winner is decided, we won't go live until the winner is decided. I think that's the fair thing to say. It'll either be 11 p.m. Eastern or after the winner is decided. Mm-hmm. So that'll be the plan. And we hope you guys join us there. And then we come back on Monday. We talk about every Northern team kind of in a reflective way. And then on Thursday, we look at every Northern game, every Northern team in a preview kind of way. And then on Mondays, we tell the South to cram it. So 2 things real quick. We'll get to the Cram-o-meter later. Let's go to the top 11.5 rankings. We'll start with yours, Bill. We do this because we don't want to do a playoff bracket every week. So it's the top 11, which would be, and again, it's not the same as a playoff bracket, but it has the playoff in mind. And then the half is the team that maybe isn't one of the top 11 teams, but we've got our eye on them. So who's your top 11.5 this week?
Sure. Yeah, number 1 for me is still Texas. I did consider putting Ohio State 1, but I kept Ohio State at 2, mostly thinking that if that needs to change, it'll change after this week. I have Penn State at number 3, Iowa State at number 4, Oregon at 5, BYU 6, Miami 7. And then I have the group of teams that I think probably should still be ranked. So I have Alabama, Georgia, Clemson, 8, 9, 10. Indiana 11, and then my 11.5 is Pitt. I have Indiana ranked ahead of Pitt as both unbeaten teams because Indiana, I think, has just been a little more complete on both sides of the ball. Pitt has like a better win against West Virginia. I think that's better than anything Indiana has on its resume. But Indiana, like advanced metrics wise and game control and stuff like that, has just played better on both sides than Pitt has. So I have Indiana ahead of them.
So we're going to be similar here. And the thing that we can talk about is that you and I legitimately are just ranking Iowa State, BYU, Pitt, and Indiana in a way that is different than the polls based on that middle clump of Southern and SEC teams primarily. So we're talking about Iowa State undefeated, BYU undefeated, Indiana undefeated, and Pitt undefeated, right? So we're talking about 4 Northern undefeated teams that in the polls are behind the clump of one-loss SEC teams. So let's do my rankings real quick to make this point. I have Texas 1, Ohio State 2, just like you. I have Oregon 3, Penn State 4, Iowa State 5. I have a lot of respect for you having Oregon 5 behind Penn State and Iowa State because I think there are cases to be made there around there. It does depend. I'll be very curious how the Oregon-Boise State game evolves.
Yes.
Because Boise State, in the end, looked like the better team that night, and Oregon found a way to win. And in the moment, it was like, man, Boise State as a group of 5 team looked like the better team. And by the end of the year, it might be like, wow, Oregon found a way to beat the 8th best team in the country. If that's what people think of Boise, because Boise is really good. So I understand why you have it now, but that actually, I think, do you think by the end of the year, that could actually be a huge plus on Oregon's resume, where right now through 6 weeks, it's kind of like, you almost lost.
Yeah, because now it's like, oh, you almost lost. He really gave up a lot of rushing yards to Ashton Genty, who might have 3,000 rushing yards by the end of the year. So yeah, I think that win has a chance to age quite nicely.
Way to not shut down modern day Barry Sanders. It's like, okay, we held him to under 4 bills. I don't know what to tell you. We didn't give up 60. So I have Iowa State 5, Alabama 6. I hate myself. BYU 7, Pitt 8, Georgia 9, Miami 10, Indiana 11. And I got my eyeballs on Kansas State because, again, I do think you should think about it this way in the modern world, where we're not just loss hunting. We're not just looking at a 1, because like a 1 is acceptable. A 1 in the loss column is completely acceptable. It's so goofy that you don't dismiss it, but it is not indicative. So that's why I've got eyeballs on Kansas State. They have a huge one with Colorado this week, coming off an off week, but that's why I have them that way. So again, just Bill, why? A, how do we explain it? And B, how big of a deal do we make of it? That in the AP poll, for instance, as we compare to our top 11.5. So the AP poll has Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State. It's the first time the Big Ten has ever had 3 of the top 4 in the history of the AP poll. So good job getting Oregon in your conference, and now you can break records. So that's great. Then the AP poll goes Georgia, Miami, Bama. And we have Georgia, Miami, and Bama lower than the AP poll does. So that is team with the loss, team that really is on the edge of having 2 losses in Miami with Virginia Tech and Cal, and then Bama that just lost to Vanderbilt. They're 5, 6, 7. But I even understand that. Like, that's not where I'm going to go crazy, because voters are who they are. Miami is still undefeated, and Georgia and Bama, we get the deal. So that's not where I'm going crazy, Landis. Tennessee 8, Ole Miss 9, Clemson 10, all of them with 1 loss. I really just legitimately, not in a screaming Saturday night way, in a contemplative, Monday, thoughtful, reflective way. I have no freaking idea. Darn it. Sorry. I have no freaking idea why Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Clemson should be ranked ahead of Iowa State, BYU, Pitt, or Indiana. Do you have a reason, Bill?
I don't have a reason. No, it doesn't make any sense to me, especially BYU, which beat Kansas State. Whatever we think of that game, and we have talked better, I think, about the nuances of that game than other people have, but the result was the result. That was a lopsided win for BYU against Kansas State. And BYU also beat SMU, which beat Louisville this week. And like Notre Dame's getting propped up for beating Louisville. Notre Dame is ahead of BYU, and like BYU beat the team that Louisville just lost to. So like I don't understand why that is the way that it is. I get that like there's no one super impressive on Indiana's schedule just yet, but doesn't beating the crap out of teams matter? Like I don't
It
understand
matters sometimes.
why that doesn't matter. Yeah, it would matter if it was I don't know, Arkansas doing it, I guess, but it's not Arkansas, it's Indiana, so Indiana's still 18th. I don't there is no explanation for it. Unless your poll
BYU
methodology just like I think this team's better and that's why I'm ranking them that way, which is fine, I guess, like if that's the way you want to go about it, but I don't think that's the way you should go about it when you're doing this.
And if you go about it that way, you almost automatically wind up with a biased Southern lean, because if it's just what you think, you're just allowing recruiting rankings and a history of the SEC winning a lot of national championships in the last 20 years affect your ballot. LSU is 13th in the AP poll. LSU lost to USC, and USC lost to Michigan and Minnesota. BYU has a win over number 18 Kansas and over number 25 SMU. And they are behind LSU. BYU is undefeated. LSU has a loss. BYU has wins over 2 top 25 teams. Who's LSU's best win? Can you look that up? South Carolina?
South Carolina, I think, yeah.
Like LSU does
LSU
not have
also
a ranked win.
LSU played UCLA and like didn't hammer them the way you're supposed to hammer UCLA.
But LSU does not have a ranked win, right?
I don't believe. I'm looking now. I don't think so.
And the team they lost to is no longer ranked.
LSU has beaten Nicholls State, South Carolina, UCLA, and South Alabama.
Okay. And has a loss to unranked USC. BYU has wins over 2 top 25 teams and is 1 spot behind LSU. I want to say it again for the clip. I keep stumbling. I don't like being contemplative. I'm better when I'm shouting. Let's try it. Let's try it shouting. See which one you like better.
Okay.
I can't believe BYU is right behind LSU. Or I can't believe BYU is ranked behind LSU. LSU has a loss to an unranked USC team. No good win. BYU has 2 wins over top 25 teams and is undefeated. Can anybody rationally explain why LSU is 13th in the AP poll and BYU is 14th? Which one do you like better? Did you like the shouting better or the second thing?
I like the second thing because it was like pretty stern, but like in a way, I like when like clearly like the rantings of a madman can make you uncomfortable and like make you think like, boy, that guy's capable of anything. But when you deliver something as sternly directly into the camera, with the tone and the pace that you did, that to me is far more like this guy might kill me. Like I like that. Yeah.
You're gonna be a good dad. You're gonna be a good dad. That's good. I think it's fair to treat poll voters and Southern college football fans as children. And we should address them as such. Fair?
Yes.
Here's how this works. Ole Miss blows. They say I lost it there. If I'm stern, but that's my argument. Hey, kids, gather around. Let me explain why Ole Miss can cram it and Iowa State should be in the top 5. But there's just a lot of this stuff. The whole point of this, and we're going to do more of this for the course of the week. It's like we don't need a segment for this, Landis. This is who we are.
Yeah.
But it's just everywhere. And so we're going to continually point it out. And I find it right now, I don't think we have to freak out because I don't think the idea that it's happening right now guarantees that it's going to keep Northern teams out of the playoff. But I think there are multiple things right here. And the 4 best examples are these 4 undefeated teams: Iowa State, Pitt, BYU, Indiana, with good wins, dominant wins against some bad opponents, against some Southern teams that have bad losses and no good wins. And it's just inexplicable. Even like to the point, Texas A&M has a loss to Notre Dame, who lost to Northern Illinois, and then Texas A&M beat Missouri, who was ranked, but like Missouri was overranked, right? So anyway, I don't think Texas A&M has a great resume. Okay. Kansas State lost at BYU, just got blitzed, but they also dominated an Oklahoma State team that once upon a time people thought maybe was decent. They played a close game at Tulane, but they won on the road. You do sort of have to decide how you're going to take that into consideration. Texas A&M is 15th in the poll. Kansas State is 18th. They both have 1 loss. Kansas State's loss is to a team that is Oh, this is the problem. Notre Dame is ranked
Yeah.
ahead of BYU. That's also a problem.
Yes.
Like who's anyway, the point that I was trying to make, except then the poll is so screwed up in multiple ways that you can't even make the point you want to make. Texas A&M was ranked behind Kansas State in the preseason. So it's not even a situation where, it's the preseason polls throwing it off. No, Kansas State was ranked ahead of Texas A&M. Texas A&M lost first. So but what about Texas A&M now should have them ahead of Kansas State when they both have one loss? And I think the loss to BYU is better than the loss to Notre Dame. It's not even about the specific instance, Bill. It's about the repeated time after time after time that we're going to continue to note, right? We're just going to call it out.
Texas A&M is getting pumped up because it blew out a Missouri team that hung with Vanderbilt, and you got to be impressed by a team that hangs with Vanderbilt and gets a 3-point overtime win. That is a quality win for Missouri to beat Vanderbilt, and then that's a quality win for Texas A&M to beat Missouri by 31 points.
So we're really far down the path of the Cram-o-meter by now. This is the Cram-o-meter conversation. Let's go to the Cram-o-meter. 2 questions about Cram-o-meter. If you are writing it out, our graphic has all caps, which makes it look strong and good. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are writing out Cram-o-meter and it's not all caps, is the M capitalized? And is the O capitalized?
I would capitalize the M because if it's lowercase, I would read it as cram-o-meter. If you didn't
Okay, that's the other question. What do we like better? Because it's not a thermometer. I kind of like cramometer, but then I'm worried that you lose the cram. So officially, because I don't know how this works, and I was going to make it a surprise and hopefully unveil it in a couple of weeks, but I'll just tell it now because we're all friends here. I'm going to try to trademark Cram-o-meter, and the South can cram it. I don't know how you do that. I'm going to call the trademark person. I don't know, Dr. Trademark. I just call the government, call the White House and ask for the trademark person. I don't know how it works. So if we do it, we need to know how to say it and how to write it. So we'll go capital M, and we're definitely on Cram-o-meter, not cramometer.
Definitely yes to the second one. I do want to ask you, in the spirit of the Halloween season, would you consider cram-o with an apostrophe meter like jack-o'-lantern?
Oh, but then when it's not the holiday season, I'm worried that people would think it's Irish. It's the cram-o-meter. Hey, why don't you cram it? Who's going to cram it more, LSU or Texas A&M? Oh, who doesn't have the luck of the Irish? The Aggies, because they lost to Notre Dame. I lost it there. And then you get this every week. O-meter. Hey, nice to meet you. Cram-o-meter. I don't know. I don't know that that's what anybody wants.
Our guy John in the comments says that cramometer is how the scientific community would pronounce it, and we are first and foremost a show of scientists, so maybe we should call it the cramometer.
Many people have said this is a football science show. Those guys really break it down. We can create an entire scientific method around college football. Number one, because this is like when you have the scientific method, it's like you have to have a theory and then try to prove it. Mm-hmm. Right? Isn't that the scientific method? We all learn the scientific method. Theory. The South can cram it. Evidence. Vanderbilt beat Alabama. Conclusion. The South can cram it. That's football science on KOTN. How hard can the South cram it? I did go back and add up our ratings. We forgot to do it in week 1. We talked about it, and then I was like, I was a terrible host, and we didn't do it. We've done it. So this is like reflecting back on. So this will be our week 6 Cram-o-meter because it's based on what happened in week 6. Our combined rankings, the average, in week 2, we were an 815 on the Cram-o-meter. In week 3, we were a 975. That was after Georgia almost lost to Kentucky. And we were like, okay, it can't get worse than this. Mm-hmm. Week 4, we were a 910. And then last week, we were a 1200 on a scale of 1 to 1,000. And that was before Arkansas beat Tennessee and Vanderbilt beat Alabama. So where are we now? I'm a 1,500.
Okay.
I'm breaking the scale, but I didn't break it. Kalen DeBoer broke it, and Josh Heupel broke it, and Arkansas fans storming the field, and Vanderbilt fans storming the field. Vanderbilt beating a number 1 team for the first time ever and a top 5 team for the first time ever, they broke it.
Mm-hmm.
Arkansas getting its first home win over a top 5 opponent since 1999, they broke it. Thank you. We either broke it or we just have to increase the scale, because 1,000's not enough, Landis. It's burning. The South is burning. So I'm at 1,500.
We do need to increase the scale, because I'm at 1,873, because that's the year that Vanderbilt was founded as a university, 1873.
Oh, it's going to be so good. The trademark's going to be so good. Once we trademark it, then we can make one. We're going to be in the lab. What are you making? I'm making a Cram-o-meter for Bill Landis. Hey, doesn't cram like tam-o-shanter? That's an Irish thing, isn't it? Isn't that an Irish thing? What's a tam-o-shanter? Can we look that up? That's a thing. It's got O in it.
I have no idea.
I think it's a thing. Maybe Mike can look up what a tam-o-shanter is and come and tell us, because then it could be a cram-o-shanter, and it's an Irish Cram-o-meter.
It's the name. It's Scottish. It's a Scottish.
Oh, now I got to do a Scottish accent.
It's a Scottish hat.
Well, that's the difference. A Scottish hat is a tam-o-shanter, and an Irish hat is a cram-o-shanter. So I'll wear a cram-o-shanter for Halloween when we do a Halloween show. They just can cram it so hard. I have not heard it yet. I know people are like, this is the thing that's a little bit weird. People are like, I'm excited to hear what Feinbaum has to say about Alabama now. So I guess they are critical of themselves sometimes, but I feel like they're critical like a fan, which I always note that with journalists, which is like, you're never critical, you're never critical, you're never critical. And then when something bad happens, you react like everybody should be fired and they should burn the program down. And it's like, oh, your feelings are hurt. You're not being an analyst. You're pouting. So I don't know what has been said on Monday. I'll go back and check on it, because we're going to be talking about this kind of stuff more. But I wonder if that's like, it's like, oh, they're critical of Alabama. Oh, like they're critical of Alabama. Like maybe they are marching on Kalen DeBoer's house, critical of Alabama. You know what I mean? Aren't you curious what that actually is going to sound and look like?
I am. There's actually, I haven't gone and read it yet, but I know Michael Casagrande, who covers Alabama. I just saw the headline, but it looked like a column that was going to be pretty scathing of Kalen DeBoer. So I'm excited to go read that one. Yeah. By
the way, I was pulling out every clip of being right about this whole thing from the preseason, but I know one of the things I said, and I didn't look for this clip, was as soon as they lose, they're all going to turn on him for being too easy and too player friendly and not being tough enough. And like that has already happened. So like we knew all of this was coming, and now it's like I almost like feel bad for Kalen DeBoer, even though everything is unfolding exactly as I predicted it would unfold. So that's our Cram-o-meter.
Did you see?
I don't know what to say, man.
Brian in the comments was following up on your scientific method, and he gave you observation: Alabama loses to Vanderbilt, Tennessee loses to Arkansas. Hypothesis: the South blows.
Yeah. Conclusion. Isn't the conclude? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's science. It's just science. I don't know. I mean, if the South wants to fight back against science, that's not our problem. That's their problem. This is another thing that happened. And you can be honest with me, Landis, if I am on too much alert for this. So there was an ESPN column over the weekend that had a blurb about Ohio State that said that Ohio State's win over Iowa was almost like a loss. And someone screenshotted that and sent it to me. And I quote tweeted it and said, like, Iowa would boat race, and maybe boat race was not the correct verb, but I think Iowa is a better team and would beat both Arkansas and Vanderbilt. And so like, if that's like, okay, but it was written in a way that was like, you read it and you thought, okay, this person is saying that the Ohio State win over Iowa wasn't very impressive. And then I did read other parts of the column, and then it was pointed out to me much later, and the writer from ESPN said it on his own Twitter, that column is a humor column, and he didn't mean it, and it was a joke. So I didn't get the joke. I guess that's on me. So, but I also have no F's left to give. I'm too old for this crap. And I am going to stand up for the North. And part of doing that is going to be fighting back against what I see and believe are unfair national media narratives. So If that means I'm not going to have journalism friends anymore, I am fine with that. But I'm here for the North, and I'm here for Northern fans, and we have to call it out. If it was a joke, okay. So I don't know. Should I have known that was a joke?
No, because
Okay.
I don't even know if you read the article up until that point. It would have been entirely evident that it was supposed to be a joke.
I read all 3,000 words of it, and I did not realize that it was sarcastic, that it was not.
I think after that, there were some points where like, okay, I guess this is a sarcastic article, but I didn't.
Okay.
That's the first time I've read that article any week this season, so I
Yeah.
didn't know that either.
So like we would be happy to have that writer on and explain that. Like I'm not out looking for fights, but to me, if you have a large platform that I believe influences public opinion about college football, and I believe on that platform you have said something that is unfair or biased or not true, then I don't think I'm striking the first blow. I think I'm responding to what has already happened.
Mm-hmm.
So if that leads to fights, I'm not here for the fights, but I'm not backing down from any fights because somebody has to fight for the North. So I'm not going to apologize to that writer, but he meant it sarcastically, so take that as you will. And we're not trying to make enemies here. And again, it's not about the person, it's about the article. It's about and listen, here's the thing and I just would give this as advice as an old writer. I had, I think, 3 moments in my journalism career where I wrote something sarcastically that was unfair, stupid, silly, got me in trouble, deservedly so. 2 of them were at my first job in my 20s, and I should have learned the lessons there, and I didn't because you're trying to be smug and funny, and it's what you do when you're a young sports writer because that's what you think you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And then I did it one time early in my career when I was a college football writer covering Ohio State, and it was really bad. And I got a lot of blowback, deservedly so. I apologized. I wish I had never done it. I should have learned from that previously. Like I should have known better by the time I was in my early 30s, and I did that. But I haven't, to my knowledge, done that since. I haven't been as glib. I haven't been as sarcastic, especially at the expense of individuals. And this wasn't, I mean, if you're doing it about a team, that's a much different thing than calling somebody out. I will say there have been too many instances in sports journalism in the past year of people who are old enough to know better being silly and glib and then sort of getting in trouble. And you should know better. And especially in a world where you have a huge audience and you're getting out to people, like it's not on the audience's job to understand what you were trying to do. Tell people what's up. People just want to know what's up. Have an opinion, have a take. That's great. But like, it's not on us to read between the lines. I don't know what to tell you about that. So that's my journalism lesson. And bottom line is I'm old and I've done it for a long time and I have the scars and I screwed up plenty. But maybe we're old enough to know better. No? Maybe we're old enough to know better?
Yeah. I had a very similar experience like early, like when I was a college journalist. So like that sits with me. I try not to be that way anymore.
Yeah. So anyway, don't say stuff and we won't call it out. All right. Last break. We have no, we're not going to take a break yet. We're going to do our 2 more categories before we go to the break. God, we're so behind. Long Monday shows when the sport's on fire. That's the thing. Right. The sport's not on fire. The South is on fire. Everybody was like, what a crazy week in college football. It's like, I don't know. It was kind of cool up here. I mean, the Washington win over Michigan, like that's a good Washington win. Yeah, it was a top 10 team that lost, but that was more about Washington, I thought. And then like the Minnesota upset, like that's a good Minnesota win. Like it wasn't the same as Alabama and Tennessee tripping over their own feet because there were 4 field stormings this week, right? Washington, Minnesota, Arkansas, and Vanderbilt. And we should have had a 5th one at Cal, but Cal blew it against Miami. Yeah. So that's all great. But do you agree that the field storming at Washington and Minnesota is more like pretty good mid-tier teams playing well? And the other court field stormings were like gigantic upsets where these huge, highly talented favorites blew it.
Yes, I would maybe be closer to lumping the Tennessee loss in with the other 2 because I just think it's not necessarily Tennessee's fault that it was getting pumped up the way it was. So I don't know that I viewed that quite on the same level as Alabama losing to Vanderbilt, which was historic for many reasons.
Okay. We'll go faster. Team with a question. Back to the north, off the Cram-o-meter. Hey, off the Cram-o-meter. Oh, it's Boston College. I can still do an Irish accent for Boston College. What do you have? You have a team with a question, Boston College. What's your question, Bill?
Oh, you know what? I was going through my notes before the show, and I was like, I don't think I have enough here. And it's because I totally glossed over this section.
Oh.
But my team with the question is, I know what I want to talk about, and it's just Boston College's rushing attack. Like it's not there. Kai Robichaux and Trayshawn Ward, I think, might have combined for 4 carries this week against Virginia, something like that. Like it's just, I think maybe we talked about it last week where like Boston College was one of the best rushing teams in the country last year and really returned all of the facets of that. And it's just not working. And I don't know why. And maybe it's just because that's not Bill O'Brien's bread and butter. Maybe that's all it is. But I like Boston College to me, even though I like Thomas Castellanos quite a bit, and I think is a quarterback who's definitely taken some steps forward. And Boston College does have good skill. The strengths of that offensive line, I think, are or should be running the ball. And I still think the strength of the team is its stable of running backs, which also includes Turbo Richard. I don't know that BC is going to be able to do a whole lot this year if it can't get that rushing game back into form. So that is like a major question for me with this team moving forward. Because if you're going to tell me it's going to be a drop back passing game, I just don't know that I love that with Thomas Castellanos.
Thomas Castellanos played well early in that game and at Virginia. And I think maybe Bill O'Brien comes away from that loss saying we're putting too much on him. And I think there's a chance for a recalibration here because he has played really well. He is a very talented quarterback in a lot of ways. But I don't think you want to just be like, hey, let's throw 12 out of 15 times with Thomas Castellanos. And he wound up in a situation on a third down throw, just having the ball slip out of his hands for a scoop and score. Then he threw a pick. And so I think they can get back there. They like their offensive line in the spring. And again, 3 backs to choose from. I think it's maybe a little bit of a decision. I think maybe they'll make a decision this week. Landis, no?
Yeah, I think so. I'm just surprised that this is the way that it's trended at all. And I guess like if you're not running the ball well, why would you keep doing it? But Trayshawn Ward had 4 carries for 8 yards. Kai Robichaux had 4 carries for 2 yards. And I know he has been injured. So maybe he's not 100%. Turbo Richard ran it 9 times for 51 yards. That's not bad. But that's just not enough rushing production. 29 carries for 65 yards. So there's some sacks included in that, but like that's not what Boston College should be, in my opinion. Not with the roster that Bill O'Brien inherited.
BC off this week, so they have a chance to get in the lab a little bit on that one. All right, this is my question, and it's about Michigan State. And my question is this, and I kind of mean it, and I kind of don't. Oh, wait, no, we get in trouble when we say things sarcastically. I mean this. Is Tommy Schuster, the backup quarterback for Michigan State, the number 1 quarterback in the state of Michigan right now prepared to help teams win games? And here are the candidates for this. Cole Snyder from Eastern Michigan is actually the highest rated quarterback in the state of Michigan by PFF among guys who have thrown at least have 10 completions this year. Tommy Schuster, who was a 4-year starter at North Dakota and transferred to Michigan State this year. He played and led a scoring drive late in the loss to Oregon just because Jonathan Smith said that Aiden Childs had led a scoring drive and they got him out of a blowout. Just wanted to let Tommy Schuster play a little bit. Tommy Schuster is the 2nd highest rated quarterback in the state of Michigan by PFF. Davis Warren from Michigan is actually 3rd. Then Hayden Wolf from Western Michigan is 4th. Aiden Childs, the Michigan State starter, is 5th. Joe Labus from Central Michigan is 6th. Alex Orji from Michigan is 7th. And Jack Tuttle from Michigan is 8th. So I definitely had some frustrated fans that I saw on Twitter saying Tommy Schuster would start for Michigan. But part of me wonders if Tommy Schuster should start for Michigan State. And this is the real question, Landis. I love talking about play your young quarterback, take the lumps. It'll pay off in the end. A payoff is absolutely coming with Aiden Childs in the next year or two. The lump taking is so lumpy, it is making me question that idea. He leads the nation in turnover-worthy plays with 15. The first drives against Oregon where he fumbled at the 1-yard line on where he tried to run on first down, and Jonathan, like from the 3, and he's trying to make a play. It's a little bit of a scramble up the middle. Jonathan Smith said, we're going to take a shot on first down. If it's not there, throw it out of bounds. But he tried to run and he fumbled. Punt, 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 punt with their next drives against Oregon. Like, they're non-competitive at times. Mm-hmm. And he's turning the ball over and the offense isn't working. Tommy Schuster was 24-18 as a starter at North Dakota. He's not Tom Brady, but I think he would make Michigan State more functional offensively right now. Man, Landis, this lump taking is hard, and it's at least making me reconsider as I think about saying things like, hey, Wisconsin should just play Mabry Matoyer as a true freshman and let him play. Right? Who cares? And it's like Braden Locke threw for 350 for Wisconsin this week, and they won big, and that felt good. When the lump taking is happening, it's difficult.
Yeah. I that seems like a very tricky situation to sit down Aiden Childs when he is your future. I just think maybe you're too far down the road.
And I'm not saying bench him. But I'm saying maybe play Tommy Schuster half the time, maybe rotate series, maybe say you're going to get Tommy Schuster in the game every third series, because it's really making it. And Michigan State just played Ohio State and Oregon, and they're off this week. So it's like, oh, they didn't look great against Ohio State and Oregon. Well, what are you going to do? It's number 2 and number 3 teams in the country. So I get that. And he also beat Maryland and does awesome things sometimes. But it's making me wonder about it for the players on that team who are practicing hard and then getting out there and just not really having a chance to compete sometimes, and for him. And are all the mistakes he's making, like, would it actually be better to maybe take a little bit of a breath? I don't know. I like saying things in theory that then in execution are actually really difficult.
I don't think you're off base, because if Jonathan Smith very reasonably says, like, this guy turns the ball over too much to be our starting quarterback right now, I think there's a way to explain that makes sense.
Yeah.
I just, like, we're in a world now where you worry about quarterbacks' feelings and whether or not Aiden Childs is going to transfer if you do that kind of thing, right? So it's just a very tricky situation to navigate. But for, like, the football of it, I do think Michigan State's trying to win games. And even if it is a first year for Jonathan Smith and it is a little bit of a rebuild, if you think Tommy Schuster can go win you a couple of games that Aiden Childs just isn't ready to win right now, then I don't know. Maybe you consider it. I understand why it's also very difficult to even entertain the thought.
So just remind me of this every time that I'm saying, play the young guy.
Mm-hmm.
Say, remember what you said about the Aiden Childs situation? I still think Aiden Childs is going to be really good. I do. I just think maybe it could be better for everybody to back off a little bit right now and let Tommy Schuster get some more drives. They're off this week. Maybe they'll think about it. Okay. We come back. We got to go faster through the end of the show. We'll touch on every Northern team, stuff ahead, including the teams that got us excited on Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis. Bill, you watch the SEC shorts, right? The funny little things the SEC people do. I don't know who does it.
No,
Did you ever watch them?
I don't watch. I am aware of them. I don't watch them. No.
Oh, the one. Now I feel bad that I watched it. The one this week was pretty funny. They do a pretty good job. They're pretty professionally done. It was about Vanderbilt, obviously. They made Vanderbilt a pimp. Vanderbilt's a pimp.
I like that.
It's funny. Hey, Vanderbilt's a pimp. So sometimes I watch that and I think that's where I would like us to get eventually. Like, that's like, why don't we have Saturday Night Live type skits about Northern football? Wouldn't you like to maybe do that? KOTN Studios?
I'm fine with the idea of us doing them. I don't want to be in
November. November? Do you think we could get that rolling by November? KOTN
Maybe.
Studios?
So. Yeah.
But that really is the whole, like, again, like, facetiously, we're not ready to make funny videos yet. But why can't the North have that? Why is that only the South gets to have that? We have a culture too. So we could make Minnesota into a pimp. Hey, Minnesota's a pimp. Isn't that funny? Whoop, PJ Fleck. He has a cape on. Woo. It's hilarious. So maybe we'll do that someday. Who's the team that got you excited, Bill?
It's West Virginia, because when you run the ball 65 times, I'm going to get fired up about that. West Virginia won 38-14, 389 rushing yards, as we talked about on the show on Saturday. But they ran it 65 times and averaged 6 yards per rush. It was the most attempts in a game for West Virginia since 2006. And it's just like, this is who they are. This is who they should be. It's the answer to the Boston College question we were just talking about. I think West Virginia, I don't want to say West Virginia got pass happy, but I think West Virginia definitely got away from who it is, who it needs to be to win games. Neil Brown said after that game, we have not yet run the ball like we're supposed to, like we're capable of. Obviously, they did it against Oklahoma State, and I think this is who they're going to be moving forward. And part of that is also getting the ball in Jaheim White's hands. There was, a lot of conversation about the amount of touches he was getting prior to this game against Oklahoma State. His carries by game were 8, 10, 13, and 6. And the 6 came in a game where I think he did get banged up a little bit. He had 19 for 158 and a touchdown in this game. And Neil Brown said, we gave him 19 carries, and if this was a game where we had to throw the ball, we would have thrown the ball too. So he is their best playmaker. They have a great two-headed running back attack there with he and CJ Donaldson, but Jaheim White is the game breaker of the two. He is the explosive playmaker of the two. And they got on the ball 19 times, and I think he's going to get 19 carries more often than not moving forward. So I just think West Virginia has sort of rediscovered itself, which makes them very interesting now in the Big 12 race, because even though the season didn't start off the way they wanted to, they're still unbeaten in the Big 12.
One of my big preseason predictions was West Virginia is going to be good. And then after 3 games, it was like, oh, that looks like it's wrong. Could that still be right? By November, could we be saying West Virginia's good?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think I was ever quite there on West Virginia is like gonna win the Big 12. Like I was there sometimes, but like I kind of cooled off on as we got closer to the season. But I don't want to play West Virginia if I'm a team that is competing for the Big 12 title race. I guess which is a good spot for them to be based off how things started.
But guess who has to play them? Iowa State has to play them on Saturday.
Yeah.
In Morgantown, in prime time. Like, let's go. Again, like really fun schedule for West Virginia fans. I hope they're able to get excited. Just let the brawl go. Because that is the thing about this. The playoff is still in front of you. A great season still in front of you. Let the brawl go. And guess what? The Penn State loss, the team that you lost to is number 4 in the country right now. So, and the team that came back and beat you in the brawl is undefeated. So it's like, oh, hey, West Virginia, what's up with your 2 losses? It's like, I don't know, to 2 ranked undefeated teams. 2 of the 12 undefeated teams in the country are West Virginia's 2 losses. But West Virginia's no Ole Miss. Why is Missouri ranked and West Virginia's not ranked? Like so we can go down this. I'm not going to go down.
I guess West Virginia has won back-to-back games against 2 teams that are pretty bad in Kansas and Oklahoma State.
But the reason that's true, but also the reason that Oklahoma State is bad is because the North has been beating the snot out of them. Nobody thought Oklahoma State was bad before that. And then they went through the Utah, Kansas State, West Virginia, Northern Big 12 gauntlet. And guess what? The Northern Big 12 is better than the Southern Big 12. So all of a sudden, Oklahoma State and Arizona stink. They stink for a reason because the North is taking it to them. So, but I know what you're saying. You started saying I'm excited about West Virginia, and then I got too excited about West Virginia. The team that I'm excited for was an on and off week, and it is BYU, and it's because Big Noon's going to BYU. Big Noon has never gone to the state of Utah before. That is from the BYU release. So the fact that Big Noon's going to be in Provo is going to be awesome. They're excited for it. This is great. You know, these shows, when they go to somewhere different, I was like, I don't know, whatever with the Cal thing, but like everybody at Cal seemed to have a great time. They were fired up when ESPN Game Day was there. So the idea that BYU is getting this exposure, it's homecoming against Arizona. And this news came out this week. So even on a bye, BYU got me excited. And again, like you just look for places where you can try to find a consensus opinion. ESPN.com does like instantaneous, what's your playoff bracket right now, like on Saturday night. And again, I'm a little frustrated with outlets that demand people have strong opinions 4 seconds after. Can you imagine, Landis, like if we had to do a show like on Saturday night right after the games ended, that would be ridiculous. That we would be saying insane things if we had to do that. So I hate when outlets make people do that. They say make your playoff prediction. The Big 12 winners of the 12 people on ESPN.com, 7 had Iowa State, 4 had BYU, 1 had Utah. And again, like none had Kansas State, which is just like I don't think you guys are looking at it the right way. But I thought BYU being in that, like people think BYU is a legit contender for the Big 12, which they should think that. That's not the team I would pick to win the Big 12 today, but they should be viewed as a legit contender, and they're getting a show. I'm excited for BYU.
Are Gus and Joel doing that game?
I don't know. It doesn't say in the release.
It's interesting because game day is going to Eugene, even though that game is on NBC. I'm surprised Fox isn't going there.
A lot of cross. I feel like they're stealing each other's corners and being weird about things. Brady Quinn will be there though. That's exciting.
It is exciting. He's handsome.
All right, the game I'm glad I saw. This is Minnesota USC, and it's like I'm glad I saw the post game because PJ Fleck went nuts. His post game interview on the field with mobs of students and fans behind him, and he's screaming "Row the boat, ski you ma" into the camera, and he's the happiest man alive. The video of him running into the locker room and diving and crowd surfing on top of his players is unbelievable. He was a college football player, was in a training camp with the San Francisco 49ers, got cut by the 49ers when Mike Nolan was the head coach. And when he cut him, Mike Nolan said, "I think you should be a coach." Mike Nolan was at the game, and PJ Fleck got choked up in the post-game news conference talking about how important Mike Nolan was for his life. He said he wears a tie on the sideline because of Mike Nolan. I thought that was cool. And by the way, I wanted to mention, I forgot, Clark Lee, the Vanderbilt coach, absolutely started crying at the beginning of his news conference because he was so emotional about beating Alabama. Yeah. And it was awesome. And then I did get confused. His name is Clark Lee. He started talking about the best partner he could have, Candace Lee. And then he started getting emotional about that. And I thought he was talking about his wife, but Candace Lee is the AD at Vanderbilt, and they have the same last name. It's spelled differently.
Oh.
But he was getting emotional. He was crying about the support from the AD. And I just thought it was like, it's like, oh, isn't that like, she's a Lee L-E-E and he's a Lee L-E-A. Yeah. So anyway, coach
we also
crying,
got a ton,
I'm for it. I'm pro crying.
We got a ton of messages too about Tim Beck being the offensive coordinator for Vanderbilt. It is a different Tim Beck.
It is a different Tim Beck. Because the other Tim Beck that I have criticized a billion times in my life because he's former offensive coordinator at Nebraska and Ohio State is the head coach at Coastal Carolina. And is the guy that got in a little bit of trouble because he had a pose on the beach where it was like shirtless Tim Beck and 50 cheerleaders in swimsuits. Yeah. And then people were like, should you be doing that? And he was like, what? And so, yes, I do like that people know who are the people that we have criticized in the past. We'll make a list to make it easier. But anyway, I thought it was a great win for Minnesota. I thought they made winning plays. I wanted to shout out Ja Joyner, who, like Donovan Ezaraku the week before for Boston College, is a rush end who will get after the quarterback and had a strip sack that got the ball back for his team to allow them to have a chance to win at the end. So he is a great pass rusher. That was awesome. And Minnesota, by the way, is 7 of 7 on fourth downs this year. They have the best fourth down conversion percentage in the country. And again, they went forward on 4th and an inch and scored the go-ahead score. And like PJ Fleck explained that decision. I thought his explanation was great. And also I was like, wow, Minnesota's so aggressive. They're so good at this. Let's compare it to last year when I assumed they weren't as good. Minnesota this year, first in the nation, best fourth down conversion percentage, 7 for 7. Last year, best fourth down conversion percentage in the nation. They were 14 of 17 on fourth down. Ooh. So PJ Flex just got a little something for you. Glad I watched that game. What's the game that you were glad you watched?
It was the Oregon-Michigan State game on Friday night. Not because it was particularly compelling football. Oregon won the game quite handily in very similar fashion to the way that Ohio State beat Michigan State the year before. But I'm glad I watched it because I have a different point of view now, I think, on Oregon's defensive front, which really got after it against Michigan State. And I know I think I did say going into that game that given the circumstances, given the fact that Oregon was playing Michigan State coming off of just playing Ohio State, there was probably a little bit of a body blow thing there that I wasn't going to make too much about whatever the comparative results between the two were. And then it ended up being like very similar game anyway. But I did come away feeling a little better about Oregon's front defensive line, mostly front seven, whatever, however you want to label it. Jordan Birch had 2.5 sacks in that game. Derek Harmon transfer defensive tackle from Michigan State, Jamari Caldwell, transfer defensive tackle from Houston, Mateo Uyunglele, and Tatum Tuioti combined for 18 pressures. They were just like really pinning their ears back and looked super athletic. And it just helped set the table for me a little bit for what we're going to have coming up this week with Oregon taking on Ohio State. So I guess I would have probably gone back and watched that anyway, but I was kind of glad to get a view of that live, because now that front against Ohio State's offensive line is like a very compelling matchup for me that I wasn't necessarily anticipating going into the game.
No, I think it's going to be great. Again, like more of a defensive game for Ohio State, Oregon, than certainly you would have thought going into the season, and maybe more than people still think now. All right, the game that bored me, and it's maybe bored is the wrong word, but you wanted to close your eyes, was Wisconsin-Purdue, because it's so bad at Purdue. And Ryan Walters after the game, I think Ryan Walters is like in real trouble. He said, "We've got a lot to face." This is a quote. "We're a bad football team right now. We play undisciplined when it gets tight. We play with poor technique when it's our turn to make a play. We get sloppy when we have to do things to make up ground. I've got a lot to think about on Sunday. The tackling was awful. If we're just doing the same thing and it doesn't work, that's crazy, right?" And he also used the word panic in an answer to something. They also lost one of their best players in their 2025 class, cornerback Dwayne Galloway, who I think we talked about on a recruiting show several months ago. He's from Columbus, I think. Columbus, Ohio. He decommitted. Their 2026 quarterback decommitted. And that's the kind of stuff. Like they changed, they fired the offensive coordinator. They brought in an analyst. They had an analyst. They gave him play calling duties. They got outgained 589 to 216 by Wisconsin. They were 1 of 11 on third down. And they kicked 2 field goals inside the 5-yard line. Purdue did. So Wisconsin did what they needed to do. Again, Braden Locke had a huge game. It's really about it's so bad with Purdue right now. This is not, hey, get Ryan Walters out of there. This is a program in free fall. And I don't know what's going to happen, but what I think is maybe going to happen is if they do not turn this around, they're going to make a change.
I think so too. I mean, I kind of felt that once they made the OC change, because that just felt to me like a little bit of a desperate act when you're just trying to show like you're taking initiative on something, but I don't think it actually addressed any issue there with Purdue. Clearly didn't make them any better in this game. So not trending in a great direction. Yeah. All
right. The game that bored you.
It was Penn State UCLA. Penn State was I think a 4-touchdown favorite, a 28.5 point favorite maybe, and it won 27-11. I just thought it was kind of a sleepy start for Penn State. It was just interesting. UCLA playing on 9 a.m. It's body clock time. And also UCLA didn't leave Los Angeles until pretty late in the day on Friday. I think it landed in State College like 7 p.m. and everyone's like tracking their plane. It's like, I can't believe UCLA left this. Like, there's no way they're going to be ready for the game. And then Penn State's the one that played like 3,000 miles that was playing on 9 a.m. It's body clock time. So like, it was fine. They won. James Franklin actually didn't really seem to get asked a bunch of questions about starting slow. It was 14-3 at halftime. I thought that the defense was good. UCLA was playing with its backup quarterback, but I thought this was an opportunity for Penn State's offense to really kind of put it on somebody, and it didn't do that. Liam Clifford played well. Tyler Warren scored another touchdown. Nick Singleton did not play. James Franklin said he thought up until basically kickoff that Nick Singleton was going to play. Then he was told that he wasn't going to play. And then Penn State really struggled to run the ball without him. 78 rushing yards for Katron Allen, and then like nothing else for anybody else. They were held under 100 yards rushing for the first time since the Ohio State game last year. It was the first time this year Penn State has been held under 200 yards rushing. So teams are allowed to play clunkers. Like I'm not going to ding you necessarily for that, but this is also not the first kind of clunker that Penn State has played. So we'll see. I still very much like Penn State, but now it's going to get a test this week on the road at USC. And I didn't find that UCLA game obviously all that entertaining, but also not all that inspiring, I guess, about the type of football Penn State might be bringing to LA this week.
Well, we'll have Audrey Snyder, who covers Penn State, on Tuesday. And it's like, I'm just very curious about, is Penn State, and again, I don't want to say this way. I'm not going to say it that way. I'm not going to say the same old Penn State. Is Penn State who they've been, which is a very successful team that is not quite at the level of really competing at the very, very top of the sport? Is that who they are? Or are they more than that? And I think a lot of people want them to be more than that. And then they have a game like that against UCLA. And it's like, oh, maybe they're not more than that. So at USC this week for them. They're going to have to be on alert for they can't be sleepy. This will be a test. It's probably their second toughest game other than the Ohio State game, right? Number 2, did this USC trip on their schedule. Mm-hmm. So I'm very curious to have a conversation about Penn State this week. All right, super rapid fire to get through all of our other Northern teams. One thing about Pitt, they're 5-0 for the first time since 1991. It's the 15th time overall that they've started 5-0, and 4 of the previous times they won the national championship. In 1915, 1916, 1929, and 1976. And let me ask you this question. Is Des Reed, their running back, a legitimate first-team All-American candidate? Yards from scrimmage, receiving and running combined. Number 1 in the nation, Ashton Jeanty from Boise State, 210 yards per game. Number 2 in the nation, Desmond Reed from Pitt, 170 yards per game, Landis.
I think so, yeah, because he does it. He's their best receiver, and he's their best running back. It's like
he's awesome. He's
like Curtis Samuel Light from Ohio State a couple of years ago. Yeah.
Caleb Johnson from Iowa is third among power 4 backs, who we talked about a lot, at 160 yards per game. So keep Des Reed on your radar. Pitt now 35-1 odds to win the ACC. That's 6th. All right, what do you got on Iowa?
So this came out on Monday that receiver Caleb Brown is a transfer from Ohio State. He did not play against Ohio State. He's only played 3 games this year. He announced he's going to redshirt and shut it down for the season. He did not say that he's transferring. I guess he kind of left that up in the air, but that's at least like a potential viable skill guy who Tim Lester was really singing the praises of a couple weeks ago, that is now not going to be part of Iowa's offensive attack, at least for the rest of this year. And we'll see what happens after this year. So that was news that kind of broke late that I added here. But the other thing with Iowa is just quarterback questions, and whether or not Kirk Ferentz is entertaining making a change there from Cade McNamara, who is ineffective against Ohio State, and I think has largely been ineffective in every game he started for Iowa. And there are just growing, there's growing chatter about whether or not Brendan Sullivan, the transfer from Northwestern, should be getting an opportunity. From the offense, Kirk Ferentz said he's comfortable with Cade McNamara. Kirk Ferentz does not strike me as someone who would make a quarterback change unless injury forces him to. So we'll see. But we're here again with Iowa and its quarterback play.
All right, they lost to Ohio State. What do you have on Ohio State?
They're good. I think the biggest thing with Ohio State coming off the Iowa game, and I guess looking forward to Oregon, is just how improved Ohio State's rushing attack is, which we talked a little bit about in the lead up to the Iowa game. But I was just pulling some stats on some of this stuff. Like stuff rate last year, Ohio State was in the 30s, I think. Now it's number 4 in the country. Times it's been hit at the line of scrimmage was almost 40% of the time last year. Now it's in the 20s. Runs where the running back is not contacted until he's at least 3 yards down the field. It's like half of Ohio State's runs this year. Last year it was 30%. So run game design, offensive line play, better Travion Henderson, the infusion of Quinshon Judkins' talent. Ohio State is just answering, I think, every question about its rushing attack right now after putting 203 yards on Iowa this week. That's a defense that had not given up 100 yards rushing prior to that game and doesn't give up 200 a whole lot in its history. So that was pretty impressive. And I think the offense has morphed into the thing that we kind of expected it to be with Chip Kelly, but I also think it's probably looking far more efficient and explosive at this point of the season than probably even the grandest projections could have laid out.
Mega Ohio State Oregon preview Wednesday show. You will not find a better preview on a national show or anywhere. So tune in for that if you're excited about that game. One thing on Michigan is who's their quarterback still. Jack Tuttle came in, led 3 scoring drives. Sharon Moore made note of that. It feels right from the way Sharon Moore talked afterward. And they are also off this week, so they have a week to sort of sort through this. Would you guess that Jack Tuttle is the starting quarterback for the first time this season, the next time Michigan takes the field?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I think we're there.
Their team passer rating is 127th out of 134 teams. They are ahead of Louisiana Monroe, Buffalo, Northwestern, Wyoming, Kennesaw State, Air Force, and New Mexico State. 5.2 yards per attempt is second worst in the country to New Mexico State. The thing that I am curious about, and there are no indications that there is any problem here, they have 2 Florida quarterbacks committed as their next 2 guys. 2025 is Carter Smith. 2026 is Brady Hart. Brady Hart was at a game recently. I saw an interview with Carter Smith. Like, they're still locked in on Michigan, but this is one of those things where, like, you just don't want to have so many offensive struggles that people start looking at you and saying, like, I don't know if that's the place for me. So no indication right now. But if this is a lost season for Michigan, and it very may well be, you do not want that to negatively affect the future. So we've covered this a lot. We know what the deal is, and it kind of is what it is for now. So you just don't want to, if you're Michigan, you don't want it to tank what you have on the horizon, because you're still a very good football program.
Yeah, I think Sherrone Moore needs to take a real hard look at the coaching staff he built and kind of start over again after this season.
It's new, but I think, like, he has to be having those conversations in his head right now. But it will be a fascinating offseason for Michigan. And if Michigan gets to the offseason, has a bit of a lost year, gets to the offseason and says, last offseason was so chaotic, we just could not do what was necessary for this program, and we're doing it now. Okay. I think that actually is reasonable. But if they get to the offseason and say, we're running it back, then I think Michigan fans are going to have a lot to demand answers for. All right. What do you have on Kansas?
Nothing good. Kansas lost 35-31 to Arizona State. And Kansas has lost now 5 games in a row. Its only win this season is against Lindenwood, which is in the second year of being a Division I football program. And this was a loss. The last 4 of the losses have been by a touchdown or less, and a lot of them have been because the offense is shooting itself in the foot, or Jalen Daniels is turning the ball over. And against Arizona State, the offense actually looked pretty good. Jalen Daniels, I think, arguably played his best game of the year, and then the defense couldn't stop anybody. Kansas took the lead with 2 minutes left. Arizona State got the ball back and went 75 yards in like a minute and 40 seconds and won the game. So there's just really, that's nothing good or working well for Kansas right now. They are banged up on defense. It is off this week. I think the big thing that Lance Leipold was talking about was getting healthy first and foremost, and they think that maybe that can help solve some of the issues during this slide. But he's also being pretty steadfast in we have a way of doing things. It's a tried and true method. We've won a lot of games. We're not panicking. We're not changing a whole lot. But I don't know. It's not going to really get any easier for Kansas, which is off. It plays Houston, and then it plays Kansas State, Iowa State, BYU, and Colorado. So I don't know. This season obviously has gotten away from Kansas, but I really have a hard time seeing them getting anything back.
Yeah. All right. Last 2 teams, they played each other on Saturday. I'll start with Northwestern, and then we'll get to Indiana. Northwestern, it's funny. I was curious how the temporary lakeside stadium that seats 15,000 people, what that would mean for a home field advantage. And what happened on Saturday was half the stadium was Indiana fans. And a lot of people around Northwestern noted that and weren't super thrilled by it. I certainly have seen some pushback that they charged too much for season tickets. For 5. So they have 1 more game left at the Lakeside Stadium. They've played Miami, Duke, Eastern Illinois, and Indiana there. They'll play Wisconsin there on October 19th. And then their last 2 home games will be at Wrigley Field, Ohio State, and the rivalry game with Illinois. For the 5-game package at the Lakeside Stadium, premium seats for 5 games were $1,300. And then they had the kind of regular seats for between $600 and $700. Like at Northwestern, that's a lot. And there were stories in the preseason about how they were going to make more money in the temporary 15,000 seat stadium than they made at the former stadium they tore down that had 3 or 4 times the capacity. And now people are saying maybe you were so worried about making money that the prices are so high that you've priced out some Northwestern young alumni in the area or whatever. And now all of a sudden people are selling their tickets to the visiting team. So I thought it had a chance to be an interesting wrinkle for Northwestern this year. It maybe feels like they have some stuff to figure out for 2025 for their second and final year at the Lakeside Stadium. Because if you're going to do that, I mean, it's one of those things. Northwestern they have enough money. You should be trying to create a memorable, fun environment for your team and your fans. And if it's half Indiana fans, that's not that. So it's like, be wary, Northwestern, because your fans didn't love it. Jack Lausch, the young quarterback, played better. They're 23 of 38, 243. The okay Northwestern defense just couldn't stop Indiana, though, because Indiana is really good. And I was hoping, as we finish up with one thing on the Hoosiers, I was hoping we were going to end Saturday night with a single 6-0 team in FBS football. And then Cal blew it, and we have 2. So Indiana and Miami are the only 2 6-0 teams in the country. They are throwing the ball so efficiently by EPA per dropback, which is just like a way to measure efficiency and success. Every time you call a passing play, they are number 2 in the country, and the only team better is Navy, because Navy throws it 7 times a game. Like, among regular teams trying to throw the ball, Indiana is doing it more efficiently than anybody. Curtis Rourke is awesome. 14 touchdowns, 2 interceptions against Northwestern, 25 of 33 for 380 and 3 scores, no picks, against a competent defense. This is not a rollover Northwestern defense, and Curtis Rourke sliced them up. We did a whole show on Indiana last week. We don't have to do it right now, Landis, but it's real.
It's very real. Yeah. They're good on both sides.
Really good on both sides. All right, that's it for the show. We have a lot planned for Tuesday. Dan Wetzel will join as usual. I think I'm going to have like 10 hard truths about what's happening in college football right now that I'm going to drop on people. We'll plan to have a Penn State discussion Wednesday. Mega. Ohio State, Oregon breakdown. Stephen Godfrey of Split Zone Duel will drop by to help us talk about that. And then Thursday, we'll cover every Northern matchup. But I think, Landis, we're really going to dig in on Kansas State, Colorado, Iowa State, West Virginia, and Penn State, USC, because we have another good slate of Northern games. Bill, the North continues to rise up.
The North continues to rise up, and the South continues to find new places to cram it.
For our producer, Mike Yerstowski, he is the great Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises. We are so grateful to all you guys for being here. Tell a friend. Let's have some fun. Let's celebrate Northern ball. We do it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday at noon. We do it Saturday night at 11 p.m. And we do it all here on Kings of the North.